Welcome to a Prevent Connect podcast, where we explore the prevention of violence against women. This is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault.
How many of you are from law enforcement here? Is there anybody here from law enforcement at all? Okay. Anybody from that does prevention? Does everybody here do prevention? Awesome. And how many of you is it your first time here? I remember being at my first NSAC. It was in Los Angeles, and I was scared because I'm from a very rural community. Originally, I'm from Alaska. It's a real small town, village. So Los Angeles was so huge, and my first experience was there was a group, someone that was in my group, and there was a naked man walking down the middle of the road. And so that was my first experience. And so I hope that didn't happen to you on your first experience. So those of you with your first time experience at NSAC, could you please stand up? Okay. Now, let's see. Is there anybody here that is from out of the United States? You're from out of the United States? Okay, you are the winner. Okay. These prizes that I have here that are here are door prizes, and they were given to me by the Quapaw and the Seneca Cayuga tribe. And throughout the session today, we will be giving as many of these away as I can. Is that okay? Okay. They are my biggest support at the Community Crisis Center in Northeast Oklahoma, where I come from. And they and I have partnered together to try to build a sustainable prevention program in Northeast Oklahoma. So, congratulations. Those are very nice towels, by the way. Okay, I want everybody to say after me, Hog Ho Akwi. Hog Akwi. Hog Akwi. That means welcome in Quapaw. And so I want to welcome you and thank you for coming today. As I said, I'm from Northeast Oklahoma, and I've never spoke at a presentation with as many people that have this many merits. And I've been doing this for about 2 years. And I'm looking at prevention for a long-term goal, 10 to 20 years, sustainable. I may not be there for that whole thing, but my plan is to build a program that will foreseeably keep growing for 10 to 20 years till the point that it becomes so sustainable in every day that we may see that the changes in the society or the community where I'm working in. And that's why I say long-term sustainable prevention. I don't truly believe in my heart that you can take something and make it go away in a generation, not for something that has taken many generations to get to where it is. My lovely assistant, Sam, here, is going to pass around what I call the talking stick. Now, in my classes, they're mostly Native American students and Native American culture. The talking stick is something similar to what you would do in a prevention class to create a safe environment to talk in. In Native American culture, they would have council circles, and they would sit in those circles, and they would pass around a talking stick, and the person that was holding the talking stick was the only one that could speak, and it would be their truth, and that it would be their part in the discussion. That way everybody gets to take a part in that discussion and say something about it. In those council circles, you would bring up issues about what was happening in that community, and those issues would be discussed, and there would be decisions made in those circles that would change communities. So Sam's going to pass this around. You can all take a look at it. Don't rip the feathers off because they're kind of important to my soul. So today, we're going to talk about 3 different things. We're going to talk about, we're going to explore what collective and historical trauma is. We hear about historical trauma, but it's never been like thoroughly discussed and what it means in a community. The second thing we're going to talk about is some strategies that I took away from NSAC meetings in the past and from people I've met along the way, to strategies that I've used to improve the protective factors in the area that I work is a very high-risk community. Now, I'm sure those of you that have not been at NSACs before, you probably didn't see the presentations from last year, but they did talk about the disparities in Native American communities and how high risk those are. So that'll be the second thing that I'll be talking about. And finally, I want to talk about building sustainable prevention in these high-risk communities and how important that is. So those are going to be my three key points today. And this is Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, and in 1980, she conceptualized the theory of historical trauma, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that is, but I think it's important that I mention her because she was the base work for what historical trauma was and how they understand it, and we know that it's been at least conceptualized since then. I want to talk a little bit about just the brief way that she described it, and I'm going to explain a little bit, and then we're going to go and talk a little bit more about what they are, so you can tell the difference. Okay, historical trauma is a collective trauma, which is a collection of people that experience over time and across generations, so that's transgenerational, by a group of people who share an identity, affiliation, or circumstance. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about the difference between, distinguishing the difference between what collective and historical trauma is. So can anybody in the audience give me some examples? If you could put a couple examples up there, we'll start. A collective trauma is a group of people that experience a circumstance. So 9/11, for example, would be a collective one-time trauma. A historical trauma, that would be something that happens to somebody or a group of people over time. So that would identify somebody like the Korean comfort women that happened during World War II when the Japanese soldiers were snatching the Korean women and making them comfort their soldiers. And they did this over a period of 3 years. That would be a historical trauma because the trauma happened over time. So can anybody in the audience give me some other examples of what they know as a collective trauma? Maybe things, okay? Yes? Columbine, yes, that would be a collective trauma. Anybody else? Yes? Slavery, no, let's think about that a minute. Slavery was something that happened to a group of people over time. So that would be a historical trauma. I'm sorry, I should have recognized that and put that on the right side, but yes. So there's a difference between collective and historical, because collective is like a one-time trauma, and what history is showing us now and what psychologists are finding out is, and I'm not a psychologist, I have no PhD after my name, and I had to read a lot of literature to figure it out, but what they're discovering now and what the military itself is doing, like for instance in 9/11, they sent a group of psychologists out in the field immediately to handle PTSD so that they can stop some of the traumas that happen as a result. We didn't have that in history. African American slaves didn't have that. Native Americans didn't have that. Jewish Holocaust victims didn't have that. So we are dealing with a historical trauma that is a result of a collective trauma that happened over time. So we're going to have a game. There's some other examples that we could put, like the Irish famine would be a historical trauma. Anybody else have any ideas? Yes? The Japanese internment camp would be a historical trauma? Yes?
The overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy?
Yes, that would be a historical trauma. Overthrow of the Hawaiian, yeah. The colonization of Puerto Rico, absolutely, absolutely. Huh? Wounded Knee, definitely, absolutely. On the collective side, I would probably put Manchester. Yes?
I'm thinking like Hurricane Katrina and
Yes?
and collective, but for certain communities, it could be considered a historical trauma.
And you're right, and that did happen. You were actually watching that in real time. We're watching the collective trauma that happened as a result, and now we're watching the historical trauma unfold as a result. And it's becoming a historical trauma because there are now communities there that are even poorer than they were, and they're marginalized, and they're being targeted. Absolutely. So we're getting to watch something turn into a historical trauma over time ourselves, I mean, right here in our history. So, okay, thank you for that. That was really great. Everybody give yourself a hand. Thank you. Okay, we're going to have a game. I need 3 people from the audience to volunteer to come. Does anybody know what Jeopardy is? Right? Okay. So we're going to play Jeopardy, all right? And it's a fun game, really. And you don't really have to say, who is this? But we're going to guess a population of people, and it means a prize or a door prize or something. So I need 3 people. Can I have okay, come on up. Come on up. Come on up and stand right here. And you'll need to be able to see the board because that's where the questions are coming from.
Do we face the board?
Yes.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be like a game show, but I don't have a button. You're going to have to be the button. Okay. All right. Okay. We're going to talk about this and how come it's so hard to distinguish that there's these historical traumas in communities, and they're so similar and created probably by the same people. And we're going to talk about that. Okay. And we're going to talk about it because it happened to the Australian Aboriginal people. Yes. The Australian Aboriginal people had the same traumas that the Native American people do, other than the fact that the people that were creating the trauma with them actually were running them off cliffs.
All 3 events were applied to them?
All 3 events. It was so similar that I just kind of wanted to point that out because when we're going into communities and we're meeting with people, we may be going into communities where we don't even realize there's historical trauma that happened to them as a people. And so I guess what I'm trying to get across to people is that historical trauma is in many, many different societies. Jewish Holocaust societies, Aboriginal societies, again, someone said Japanese internment camps, Holocaust children. There's the similarities. We've got Holocaust children, then we've got the Japanese internment camps. Now that happened within the United States. As a matter of fact, I think that I saw a slide once which kind of might make you feel what the Syrian refugees are feeling right now, where a man was standing at a cash register and he had a big sign on the front that said, "No Japs allowed." We're experiencing that now. It's unfolding in front of us. So we know that down the line, we're going to have some historical trauma there from these Syrian refugees that are coming over. And so I want you to think about that when you're going out in the communities And maybe next year when I come back, I'll get to see some of the same faces, and we can collect information together and share information, because I'm a big proponent of sharing information to try to address these. Let's see. This is Wounded Knee. You mentioned Wounded Knee. This is a Jewish Holocaust. That's Wounded Knee. Similarities. See what I'm saying? The similarities of the historical trauma in many different communities are surprisingly the same. And these people are going to be going through the same effects of what happens in historical trauma. Let's talk about that. Self-abuse is one. Abuse of others. Alcohol and drug abuse. Suicides, homicides, domestic violence, sexual assault, traditional gender roles and relationships, all impaired. These are the things, these are effects that happen from historical trauma. So when we're going out there and we're wanting to do prevention and we're going to want to go in there and just like change behavior and make it happen, I think it's really important that we really look at where that behavior happened from, what the root of that behavior happened, and really acknowledge what happened in their history. Because the only way that they can heal is if you acknowledge that history and help in the acceptance of, yes, that is, and now we need to transcend into the future. It's difficult to change behaviors when you're looking at, especially for Native American people like myself, and I'm Native, I'm Alaskan, but they're looking at Andrew Jackson on their $20 bill every day, and he put the Indian Removal Act there. We're reminded of it by those pictures every day. The Jewish Holocaust victims' pictures are all put through history. That's a historical trauma that's lived over and over and over again. So in the pre-colonial tradition, Native women and children were never the property of men. So before the Europeans came to the United States, Native women and children were never the property of men. After the European men came, they enforced those values on the Native American men. After the colonization, the men lost their traditional nurturing roles, and they were no longer warriors and protectors. The parents were told, as their children were being taken away and put into boarding schools, that their culture was inferior, that they were inadequate to raise their own children. Therefore, a result of that was that they lost the ability to parent. Their parenting skills were lost. That happened with the Aboriginal people too. They were told they were inferior. So each historical trauma that happens is different. And what results from that could be any of the list of those things that I listed there. So kind of knowing what historical trauma you're working with is important when you're going to go out and do prevention. Oklahoma has 39 federally recognized tribes. And I work in Northeast Oklahoma that has 9 federally recognized tribes in my district. Beginning in 1830, as opposed to, it was started in 1830 in the United States, which is like why everybody was guessing Native Americans, because the timeline was so similar. In 1830, the worstest traumas that happened to the Oklahoma natives started beginning when they did the 1,000-mile walk called the Trail of Tears. And many natives were lost. Their children were put in boarding schools, and their direct objective was ethnic genocide. Kill the Indian, save the man. And believe it or not, it wasn't until 1978, with the passing of the Indian Child Welfare Act, that Native American parents gained the legal right to deny their children's placement in reservation schools. Off-reservation schools, I'm sorry. excuse me. So it wasn't until 1978 that the parents could finally say, you can't take my children away from me and put them in boarding schools anymore. That's a long time to have children in trauma in boarding schools, and that historical trauma has happened and happened and happened over years. Okay, these are the tribes SEALs that I work with, the 6 of them that I've got working with me now. And the strategies that's recommended for prevention and intervention in these communities was, I spoke about Maria Yellow Horse Braveheart earlier, and her quote. She recommended that the strategy to approach intervention and prevention in those communities is to restore their traditional culture. And they wanted them to apply some of the traditional ceremonial practices to their intervention. And I thought, well, if we're going to be doing it with their intervention, we really need to be doing it with their prevention as well. So I struggled. Well, there is not one Native American curriculum in the United States, and at that time I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I was at last year's NSAC, and Strong Oak Lefevre was here. And she was talking about a bystander intervention curriculum for Native Americans. Very exciting stuff. So I thought, well, I really need a simple plan. How am I going to do this? And there's my simple plan. I was sitting there going, oh God, what am I going to do? Because, I mean, how do you go into a culture, and especially with Native American cultures, their ceremonial practices are so different from tribe to tribe. And if you're going to go into an African American community, their ceremonial practices are the same. They're going to be different. What they do within their community is going to be different from another community. So how am I going to do that? So I decided, well, what I really need to start with is I need to participate in relevant cultural events. I need to find out, what's going on in these cultural events. So I went to powwows. I went and talked to leaders in the community, and I learned about their cultural history. I actually took history classes just so that I could learn about the culture in their area. And that was the first thing. I had a 3-part plan, and then I communicated with the leaders and found the family services departments, leaders, tribal leaders, whoever would talk to me and listen to me and help me understand, teach me, let me learn, and allow me to participate. That's what I did. And I wanted to find ways to complement my prevention education with their cultural ceremonies, because I learned from not only Strong Oak Lefevre, but Maria Yellow Horse Braveheart, that introducing those ceremonial practices with your prevention was going to make a difference. So that's what I did, and I was able to meet Strong Oak Lefevre over the phone through a friend that I also met at NSAC and has also came into our community, Patrick Lemon. He's here with us today, and this is amazing for me that he is here. And if you guys get the opportunity to talk to him, he has some really innovative and very easy ideas on how you can evaluate a curriculum or a program and see if it's working. So that's a really good point to have. Strong Oak Lefevre is right there with the talking stick in the middle of that circle. And I took that and her curriculum, which she allowed me to have, into the classrooms, and she let me have 5 of her curriculums in her classroom. And where do you go with that? the 5 curriculum standards that she gave me, she has 12 modules to her Native American curriculum. She let me try 5, and in tribal traditions, there's certain things that I think are pretty universal that they talk about. Respect for the land, respect for the water, the animals, the grass, the sky. They have respect for Mother Earth. And I thought, okay, I'd take that respect and I would use that curriculum, and I would also interject in it some prevention, like setting and respecting boundaries. So I took respect and I put boundaries in there. And so in my circle discussion, we would talk about respect and what that means in traditional Native culture, and setting boundaries and respecting other people's boundaries and having people respect your boundaries and knowing what your boundaries are was also a part of that. So that's how I interjected the two together. And humility, being humble, how not to be over boastful or braggadocious. I think that's the word that he uses, braggadocious. And then having self-confidence, healthy assertiveness, what all of that is. So I think you're familiar with those part of prevention, right? So the point is that, you know, I went into the community and I thought, okay, I've got to figure out a way to get prevention, but I don't want to harm the community that I'm going into. So how do I respect that at-risk community that has been exposed to historical trauma? And what was important to me is that those communities were there for me, and in where I'm at, and I got lucky. There was a curriculum, but I don't think they make curriculums for Jewish Holocaust victims or for Korean comfort women. So what I would recommend, I got lucky, you don't really need a curriculum, a culturally based curriculum. The best thing I would suggest is really getting yourself involved in the cultural events in your communities, and then finding ways that you can introduce that culture into your prevention efforts. Because having that culture there is a comfort, and it means that you are respecting and being sensitive to their culture, because some cultures aren't accepting of your prevention efforts. They feel it is just another way of oppressing. So, and that's talking from a Native point of view. So this is the way I preferred to make sexual assault prevention more culturally sensitive. And I wanted to honor the recommendations of Strong Okhla and Dr. Braveheart. But what do you think some of the ways in your community that we're going to need another flip chart? What do you, can you guys give me suggestions? Can we make this a discussion, a relaxed discussion? Because this is really new to me, and this is really a new adventure for me. And I put myself out here to come here today and talk about this because I truly believe it's important. And I want to share with everybody, and I want to learn from everybody as well. There's communities out there I know that have historical trauma, and I'm looking for some suggestions that we can write on the board that I can take home with me and maybe use. So this is like a two-way street for us. Does anybody have any communities in their area that they go ahead? Strong Okhla, Ray, Maria, Yellow Horse Braveheart. This is really an interesting story that now that you're saying it. Maria, Yellow Horse Braveheart is a Lakota. Strong Okhla is from Massachusetts, Greenville, I think, Massachusetts. Neither one of them know each other, but both of them are talking about the same thing. Is that amazing? So amazing. I've been working the last month trying to get them to meet each other. One is a psychologist and one is a sociologist, and I've been studying both of their work in order to get to where I am today. because I knew that I'm going into this community. I really needed to be culturally sensitive to what I was going into. I didn't want to go in and say, okay, we need to change behaviors, or this is what we need to do to change behaviors. I wanted to go in there and say, what do you need me to do to help you move to change to where you can change behaviors? And with Strong Oak's curriculum, the thing that was very good and that you will find useful, you can get a card from me afterwards, and I will email you and give you Strong Oak's information or ask her for an introduction, which is how I got introduced. I was formally introduced via email to Strong Oak, and she's excited to work with tribes all over the nation. Was inside of her curriculum, and as was introduced, was here's Patrick Lemon. He shares prevention program evaluation strategies. And built into her curriculum was this really easy strategy. It was absolutely amazing. It was a 3x5 card. Believe it or not, a 3x5 card. On one side, you wrote a question on there, such as you would write, what steps can you take to contribute to a culture of respect and help prevent relationship violence? You would go into your class with that when you were going to talk about respect. Now, I'm doing this, again, remember, I'm doing this for the first time. That's kind of a subjective question. So the outcome at the end was, sorry, Patrick, was a little bit different, and I thought next year when I go out, I might look at more of an objective question and hopefully get a more accurate evaluation of that question, because that's the before and after, like the post and pre-test on a 3x5 card. I mean, how easy is that to do, However, even with the subjective questioning, I did get some positive results. And in my sessions, we would start the sessions where we would sit in a discussion circle. I would give that question, and then throughout the class, I would give some objective questions or subjective questions. Like I said, in the discussion circle, you start with, okay, this is a topic. This is the issue that we're going to talk about today. These are the things that need to change in our community. That's a circle. In a Native American community, they discuss the issues that are happening in the community and how to address them. The talking stick goes around, and everybody has an input in that. There's no judgment in that circle allowed. There's no disrespect to anybody else. Everybody's on an even keel about how we can do that, what things we can do to change that. And then the prevention is added in there, where we do interactive activities. Like when I was talking about earlier, we do the prevention. Like in shifting boundaries, we would go, okay, what is your boundaries? What is your space? And we would actually, get them up in the circle where they would be face to face, and people would actually identify their boundaries, and just some interactive prevention exercises that you can find in your own prevention work that you probably already do. So you can mesh them and put them together. And then during that session, while we're having these, I keep hitting that, I'm so sorry if that's hurting anybody. When in the middle of these sessions and these classes you're having, you're starting with your 3x5 card at the beginning and at the end, and during the class you're getting a raise of hands on objective questions, and you can kind of think to yourself, okay, they are making a difference. You can actually, if you sit it down later and say, okay, I started out at 38%, we're actually getting it. So you take the amount of students that you have and divide it by, the amount of questions or answers that you got, positive or negative, or you can break it up. That's why I put his, this is being recorded, so you're gonna be able to get this later. I put the YouTube there of Patrick's webinar. He did this in Calcassa last year. Was it 2 years? 5 years ago. God, you didn't age a day, not one day. I took his evaluation process Strong Oak also did it when she was putting together her curriculum and actually built in an evaluation process so that you can see if your work is doing well. And it did make an improvement. I don't know if it is this way in all Native American cultures. I'm from Alaska. It is that way in my culture. And it was also that way when I went into the classes that I went into in Oklahoma that were 65 to 100% Native Americans. They separate the boys from the girls in the classes. So in the boys' class, they started out at like 38%, kind of knew what we were talking about, understood the traditional culture, and understood what we were trying to get at as far as the prevention exercises. And they went from 38% to 78% retention with the girls. They were a little more knowledgeable, same age group. They started out at like 65%, and when it was over, they were at 98%. It was an amazing difference. So Patrick had this evaluation process, and I took his words and his advice, and it worked. And if it worked for me, it will work for you. And I hope next year, if any of you take any of this home with you, I'm dying to hear if you were able to use it in your communities, because I truly believe in my heart that this is the best way to meet and reach those areas that have high risk and historical trauma communities. So next year, let's go on to next year, because I'm exhausted. This year's really exhausted me. Like I said, it's a 10 to 20 year plan for me. I may not be there for that 10 to 20 years, but the plans and seeds that I'm placing now, I hope are going to still continue to grow for 10 to 20 years, and that, what do they say, that we're going to stop it in one generation, which is really pie in the sky for anybody in historical trauma communities, because it's taken years, to get where we are. But gosh, that would be so great, wouldn't it? So let's talk about building sustainability. Throughout the last few years, like I said, I've been working on building bridges and relationships in the community. I have 6 of the tribes that are with me, or that are working with me, and we're working on building sustainability. And this is another thing that I have to thank Patrick Lemon for. He brought the tri-ethnic community readiness model. Everybody can find it online. At the end of my presentation, if you guys go look on it on the website, it'll be on CalCASA. It'll also be on Prevent Connect. You can get the websites. I put them there, the links that you can go to find this information. The community readiness model, it's how you can gauge if your community is ready for the type of prevention and change that you need. So this year, I'm going into another community, and before I start, we're putting together like a survey in the community. One of the things that Strong Oak and Maria Brave Horse Yellow Heart recommend and suggest for any historical trauma community that you go in is that you do it on a community level. So it's actually built in that you need to address it as a community, and that plays right into the community readiness model. When you go in there, the surveys are going to help you find out whether or not they are at any one of these levels that are available, like no awareness, denial, vague awareness. You can go online, find the tri-ethnic community readiness model, and it will help you find directions on how you can build those surveys and take them into your community and find out where that community's at. That, along with looking at historical trauma. Sam, can you get me the flyer over there? I want to kind of hold that up. It's in a link, but there's several links from this, and I would recommend it because it's got information on historical trauma on many different groups that we were talking about today. Jewish Holocaust victims, if anybody would like, I printed up a few of them. Jewish Holocaust victims, Japanese internment camp victims. I think there might be some Vietnamese or Korean historical trauma information that you can just go on to like YouTube and websites, and they will talk about best practices for those communities. They might give you some direction in those communities that you're getting ready to go into. So it's really a good place to look. I think it's the Minnesota, is it Minnesota that I've got on there? I did get some of my information from there. I don't know if I qualify as a researcher, but I did do a lot of research to try to be a little more effective in the communities that I was going into. So this is really, really interesting. The Tri-Ethnic Community Readiness Model is a great place to start if you want to do prevention on a community level and reach a community level, and you have to do that when you're getting ready to go into a historically traumatized community. It won't be effective if you don't take it to the community level. And in the historical writings of Miss Maria Yellow Horse Braveheart, and Strong Okhla Free Bay, they recommend doing these things on a community level and actually reaching a community level base. So I have some goals, and these ones I made for myself. So I built these relationships. I've gone to powwows, I've gone to council meetings, I've sat in classes, I've sat in round circles on the ground, and Patrick may tell you from the other day, I don't get up very well from those. I'm getting old. So I did go through some personal growth and had to learn how to get up from things. But these were some of the key components that I liked, and I want to talk a little bit about some goals to build sustainable prevention. This is a list of things that I made, and then after I'm done, maybe you can add to my list and maybe help me out a little bit. So utilizing your resources. And so I looked at myself, okay, what is my resources? Well, obviously all of us know here that we don't get paid a fortune to do our job, so I don't have like a whole lot of resources. I got my personality that, you know, most times get me through the door. And I have a car that can get me to, you know, from point A to point B and where I need to be. And I have NSAC, the people I work with, the relationships that I have at work, people that I can go to and I talk to. So that's what I mean when I say I'm going to utilize my resources. Is there any other resources that I might have that I might be overlooking? Can anybody help me out here? You obviously wouldn't know what my resources are, so put yourself in my shoes. Is there any resources that you can think of that you have that you might use in reaching out to these communities? Go ahead. Absolutely, and you're right about that. And that's a great resource, and it's free, right? Yeah, I'm all about, well, like we all don't earn a lot of money, so we kind of have to use the resources that we have. And using the resources like going out into your communities and using the land and water as a resource is extremely important. Which brings me to the rest of it, building cross-cultural collaboration. You guys already talked about that. So, and you talked about it when I say cross-culture, that's kind of hard to understand. Cross-cultural collaboration. Where I come from, there's 9 tribes. All of them have different ceremonies, and a lot of times they don't communicate with each other. That's different now that I'm there. Because my personality, I kind of drug them all to the table. And I said, hey, look, we really need to do this. Let's all get together. And in Native American culture, it's always important to bring food. So that's one thing I can do. I can cook. So I brought food. And that's how I got them to keep coming and talking to me. And now we've built friendships and relationships and have common goals and common, that's what I mean. They're learning how to use some of their things, and they're actually communicating with each other where, believe it or not, they are like 10 miles away from each other and didn't communicate with the other tribe. Now they're attending each other's events, and they're going to each other's powwows, and they're building children's powwows for the kids all together. And it's been kind of an amazing journey for me to watch. And cross-community collaboration, that would be me. I'm the community collaboration. I collaborate with them. We contact each other. If there's needs that one community has that we have a resource for, we will do that. I go to their events if they want me and talk at their events. And I offer my help. I've carried chairs. I've handed out water. I've sat and talked with elders. I've babysit children. I've done a lot of things that probably, maybe are out of the scope of what RPE pays me for. But, huh?
She's part-time.
Yeah.
That's all the shame, for sure.
Yeah, I work 32 hours a week on the RPE clock, which is when I go into the schools and I talk to the students. I build youth programs with the Native American communities that they start. I'm trying to do some peer leadership in those youth programs, and that brings me up to more things that I'm going to do in the future. I'm going to empower and outreach in the tribes and get them to be active stakeholders. I know there's a few grants in Oklahoma that are coming up, and I'm trying to encourage the tribes to outreach and get an RPE grant themselves so that we can actually officially start partnering together in the prevention efforts. I want to get youth involved. When we get ready to start building a curriculum in each of these tribes, Strong Oak is coming down. She's really making a special trip down here to come down to Oklahoma and work with us sometime in the end of August or September. And I've invited each of the tribes' family services departments that work in their outreach to the table. And I've invited the ceremonial leaders or anybody that wants to be involved in this curriculum process to the table. And I've invited a few leaders of the youth in the communities that they want to be involved in this prevention process to the table, so that when we build this curriculum for these tribes, so they each can have their own prevention curriculum for each tribe, they will have the input of those key members. In this could be something that is sustainable and that can be passed down just like a ceremonial process. Like you were saying, the songs can be built in with the prevention, and then it could be passed down as a tradition, and then as time goes on, you're actually seeing a change. It becomes part of the way you breathe, part of how you think, and that's what I'm hoping to happen in this area. So that comes in when I want to build the council and the committee that's going to help improve and be the consistent, comprehensive prevention programs that each community builds themselves in a model that is made by them and meets their community's needs, not what I think that their community needs, but what they feel their community needs to go to the next best prevention level. Okay, how much time do I have? Is it time? Oh my gosh, you guys, I timed this just right, and it's not Indian time. I was kind of worried about that, turning into Indian time. I want to thank everybody for coming here today. I'm glad that you turned up. I was a little concerned. This is, like I said, my first prevention track that I've ever done. It'll be easier from now on, but it was good for me because you gave me this list of things that I can take home and I can learn from, and I hope to get some contacts so that I can contact you and learn more from you. Like Sam said, I reach out across the country if I have a question or if I have something I need. I truly believe that this will work. I believe this plan, this blueprint will work in those high-risk communities. So thank you. Here on my track, and it's being recorded on Prevent Connect, and it's being recorded on Calcasa, I have links and websites that you can go to find this information. The YouTube on historical trauma for different communities, like Jewish Holocaust communities, Japanese internment camps. I don't have the list here with me, but it's on there. There's some YouTube videos and some books that you can get if you have those type of communities and you want to reach out to them, and they will give you some suggestions on what you can do in those communities that is culturally relevant. So I might let you guys go early. Are you going to be okay with that? Okay. Again, I'm Cindy. I have my card up here, and a funny story. Next to that, I have a little sticky note pad. When I first started, I had a little bit of promotional money, and I really wanted something that I could give away at like events that would have, you know, like a number or a good sexual assault prevention statement. And I saw this little red Solo cup, and then on the side it said, you know, just because I'm drinking this doesn't actually give you consent or something like that. Anyway, it took me 6 months to get this sticky note approved. So it's a governmental thing. And so I really covet these little sticky notes, but I'd like you to take some home. It's got my number on it. Okay. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this Prevent Connect podcast. Prevent Connect is a project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, with funding from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views presented on Prevent Connect are not necessarily the views of the United States government, the CDC, or Calcasa. To learn more about Prevent Connect, visit www.preventconnect.org. For more information about Calcasa's mission, or to show your support, visit calcasa.org. That's CALCASA.org.